the wheel off, use a 19mm socket. Take the wheel off. You're going to pull the push pins out. Just use a trim tool or a push pin tool. Take the inner fender well out. And some screws over here. We'll take those out. Take these screws out. Use a T20 socket. There's a screw right here. Take that one out. And also the push clip. This just comes down. Take this screw out here. And this one. Now the inner fender well will slide right out. Slide that out. Pull this shield down, use a 7mm socket, take the screws out. And grab the shield and slide it down. And we can drop this down a little bit. If you want to, you can take some bolts out and push pins, but you don't have to. There's a drain right here on the radiator. And you can actually put a hose on it so you can redirect the coolant. You want to make sure that the vehicle is not hot when you open this. So that's there. And then there's the valve to open it. You just slowly open that. Make sure you have a drain bucket underneath. And again, make sure it's not hot when you're doing this. There we go. Disconnect the connector on the mass airflow sensor. Just move this lock tab back and just use a small pocket screwdriver. Push down on the tab, slide it out, and then just grab the harness, slide it up. Loosen up the worm clamp right here. Just use a straight blade screwdriver. And slide that apart. Take these screws out. And slide the air box off, out of the way, pull the air filter out. Pull this hose off the air filter box, just slide it forward, and then just grab the air filter box, slide it up, and we'll slide it out of the way. That's drained out. Now we can just close that drain, take that hose off if you put a hose on there. Now I'm going to use an E14 socket. It's basically a negative Torx. And we're going to loosen the tension on the tensioner right here. You can take the belt off while you have that loosened up. And then before I let go of the tensioner, I'm just going to use an Allen key and just slide it in there. There's a little piece of metal in there that's going to keep the tension on the spring. Underneath the vehicle, I'm going to use a floor jack, and then I'm just going to use a block of wood just so we don't ruin anything. And get underneath the oil pan. You want to get close to the edges of the oil pan, not too much in the center, and just lift up on the motor slightly That should be good. Now remove the mount. Use a 15mm socket. Take these bolts out. And this nut right here, all 15mm. Just want to raise up on the engine a little bit more just to take some of the tension off. There we go. Now the tension's off of the mount. Now take these 3 bolts out. Use a 15mm socket. Take the bolts out. Grab the engine mount, slide it out. Take this mount off, use a 15mm socket, and there's 3 bolts holding it on. One in the back here, one underneath. And one in the front right here. Those are all loose, and just slide it up and out of the way. Now we can take the belt off and slide it out of the way. Now we're going to take the water pump pulley off. We have to take these bolts out. You can use an E12 socket, and if you're doing this by hand, you can use a 15/16 wrench or a 24mm wrench and just put it on the water pump to prevent it from spinning. Loosen these bolts up, or you can use an impact. Those are all loosened up. All right. Now we can take those off. There we go, and slide it off. Take this pipe off here, just use a 7mm socket, loosen up the worm clamp, and twist it back and forth, slide it out. Pull this hose off right here. You can use a pick, just get underneath this clip and just slide up till it unlocks, and grab the hose and just rock it back and forth, sliding it off. Slide that off. You can reattach this clip for later. Just push that down all the way. Set that aside. Disconnect this connector right here. Just pull on the tab, slide that up out of the way. Then there's a hose clamp underneath here. You want to take that hose clamp off. Use some hose clamp pliers. And slide the hose clamp down. If you could take that hose off right now, you could do that. Might need a pick. Just go all the way around. Then you can twist the hose and slide it off. You might lose a little coolant. Might want to have a drain bucket underneath. There you go, just a little bit of coolant. Now in the thermostat housing, there is 3 bolts, 2 on the top, 1 underneath. Use an E10 socket to take those out. If this hose was in your way, you could take this off too, but it's all set. It's coming out. And slide that out. Slide that out. Then just grab the housing and slide it off. You're going to lose a little more coolant. Take this hose off, use some hose clamp pliers, move this hose clamp. Just slide it down. Just right there is good. Just using a pick, just go all the way around. Just try to break the seal. There we go. Set that aside. Just gonna move this connector out of the way. Just loosen up the lock. Push down on the tab and then slide that out of the way, just so it's not in the way. Now we're gonna take all these bolts out. We're gonna use an E10 socket. Again, there's 2 right there, 2 up there. There's 1 over here, 1, 2, 3, 4 underneath. Take all those off. They are different lengths, so keep in mind which ones go where. Same as the shorter one. There's a longer one. Medium long one. The short one. Another long one. Another short one. And there's another long bolt right here. Now just grab a pry bar. There is a tab on the back side of here. Just gently pry the pump out. There we go. You're going to lose a little more coolant, and there it is. Now, being careful, you can use a razor blade, get behind the gasket, or a scraper. Slide the gasket off. And then you want to use a scraper or a razor blade and just scrape any excess material. You can use a little brake parts cleaner on a rag and just wipe the area where the gasket goes. Try to make it clean, make sure there's no gasket material. Now take the gasket, slide it in place, get it lined up. If you want, you can take some of the bolts, get the bolts started. Get that lined up. Just putting that temporarily there. And one of the smaller bolts goes there. One of the extremely long bolts goes right here. There's another extremely long bolt that's going to go in the top hole that goes right underneath. Then the medium long ones, there's one right there. Another medium long one goes over here. This one's in the wrong spot. Put these smaller ones in. Take that one out. And another medium long one goes up top here. And the other ones are small ones. So it's a small one down below here. And there's another small one down here. So get all those snug, and then we'll torque them. And you want to torque these bolts to 71 inch-pounds. And you want to cross torque them. So go from the middle and work your way outwards. 71 inch-pounds. Plug this connector back in, lock it down. You can hook this hose up on the back side, slide that in place, and move that hose clamp over. Good right there. Take the thermostat, line it up. You can slide it into the hose down below. Makes it easier to just do it now. And then make sure the gasket's on there good. We'll get the bolts lined up. Get these started. Before I tighten this down, I just want to move that hose clamp up in position using the hose clamp pliers. Once that looks good, you can release the hose clamp pliers. That's good right there. Now, fitting a torque wrench in there the best you can, torque those bolts to 71 inch-pounds. Now I'm going to plug the connector back in. Lock that down. Now just slide the upper coolant hose on. Lock it in place. And now you can put this snorkel on. I'm just going to place it on for now. I'm not going to tighten it until the rest of the air box is on. Now put the pulley on. Get the bolts started. And we'll tighten these down. And make sure these are snug. That's good. Yep, those are good. Slide the belt over the crank pulley, then around the tensioner, around the alternator, and then around the AC compressor down below. Just have it off the water pump for now. Just hold it there. Then take your E14 socket, go on the tensioner, then take the tension off the tensioner, just like you're tightening, and slide the belt over the water pump. That's good. And then you can take that pin out, you put in there, and you're good. Make sure you check the ribs of the belt, make sure they're around all the pulleys correctly, and those look good. I'm going to slide this mount in place, get the bolts started, and make sure those bolts are tight. Now slide the mount in place. Get all the bolts started. If you have to, you can raise up the engine a little bit with the floor jack. And tighten these down. this point, we can lower the engine down so the engine weight's down, or just lower it a little bit and tighten it down. Now we can lower the engine completely. Take the air box, line that up. You can slide this hose in place. And gently push down on the rubber grommets. Just like that. Push that hose in. Put the air filter in. Take the air box, line this up. Now tighten the screws down. Tighten the worm clamps down. Just snug it up. And don't forget to tighten this one down as well. Connect the connector for the mass airflow sensor. Lock it down. Slide that wire in that retainer. And just put this lower shield in, get it started. Tighten these down. And put the inner fender well in. Line it up. So we go underneath here. Line up there. Get all the push pins started and push those in. Some up here. And put the bolts in, get those lined up. And the bolts underneath, get those started and tighten those down. Put the wheel on, get it lined up. Put the lug nuts on. Now I'm going to torque the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds in a cross pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. And just go around again, double check. Now take the appropriate coolant, make sure it's the appropriate mixture, and fill up the coolant at the reservoir right here. And you want to fill it up to the full line. With that filled up, then you want to run the engine for about 10 minutes, constantly monitoring the level out here and monitoring the coolant temperature, make sure it's not overheating. and then shut it off, let it cool down, and adjust the coolant level.